I'll take 5 of these. The showroom went still as if someone had switched off the world. Chrome breathed under hot lights, the smell of fresh paint and engine oil hanging like incense. And when Elias Mercer stepped through the glass doors in a torn cap and a shirt marked by years of grease and daylight, the hush sharpened into sharp, small sounds, stifled laughs, the scrape of heels, the low murmur of disbelief. Elias moved slowly, boots scuffing the tile, a faded backpack slung over one shoulder like a memory he kept close. He stopped before the largest truck, a white Leviathan whose grille caught the overhead lights and turned them into a halo, and laid a calloused hand on its cold metal as if greeting an old friend. The room had the polite architecture of luxury, salespeople in tailored suits, a polished counter where Victoria Crane sat with silver hair that matched the edge in her voice, a young woman named Maya exchanging glances with a colleague who was already smirking. Elias's voice did not wobble when it carried across the showroom. It was small and steady and landed in the center of mockery and suspicion. And in that split second, every face that had bent to mockery learned what embarrassment felt like when it met the plain weight of resolve. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if the story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend. Now, let's begin. Elias's history was a map of small losses stitched together. Once an engineer who could coax stubborn engines back to life with nothing but patience and wire. Once a husband whose laughter filled the kitchen until sickness stole his Clara and partners stole his company. After that, he slept in the workshop, traded labor for soup, and kept the names of the people he'd helped folded into his heart like origami. But that morning he carried more than himself through the showroom doors. He bore a blueprint for redemption called Second Route Logistics. A company he had started with ragged hands and a stubborn sense that people could be rebuilt if someone would give them a second road. What the sales floor saw was an old man and a fantasy. What Elias held, sealed and proper, was a stack of documents that smelled faintly of ink and truth, purchase orders printed cleanly and a signature at the bottom that made Victoria Crane's eyes go wide because she knew the script. The regional head of Mercedes Commercial Partnerships, a man who had once sat in Elias's classroom by the desert light and learned how to keep a truck alive on a prayer and a wire. The memory of teaching that boy, now a man in a position to open vaults, was the quietest, most unassailable weapon Elias owned. Miranda, that is, Victoria, felt the blood go out of the room. A laugh that had been cruel shrank into a guilty silence as the papers were laid on her desk. Young Maya's face crumpled with shame that had no ceremony, and Victoria, who had spent her life reading people with a dealer's intuition, felt the sudden, sharp crack of being wrong like ice beneath her feet. Elias didn't try to explain or scold. He moved as someone who had learned softness by necessity, who had learned that humiliation was a lesson best answered with work. He poured quiet water for himself, adjusted the stack of forms, and let the truth unfold without flourish. The payment cleared. The authorization was real. By dusk, 5 trucks glittered in a row under a sky where the sun pushed gold across white metal, and Victoria watched, the room empty now of smugness, her hands folded in a way that suggested she had been given a new thing to carry, the knowledge that pride had cost her a small piece of her humanity that morning. The story that followed was not about trucks, it was about the lives those trucks were meant to carry. Elias signed each final sheet with a hand that had hardened from wrenches and winter, and he spoke of drivers who had names and faces, a veteran who knew how to sleep anywhere because rest had become a stranger, a single mother whose night shift washed away the days, a man whose addiction had been a refuge from a life that would not look at him. He hired those people not because charity felt good but because he believed in commerce as a kind of mercy. The vehicles were transmissions of dignity, engines of second chances. When the convoy rolled out at dawn, folks on sidewalks tipped their hats and waved. There were tears on cheeks that had long ago learned not to hope. Word spread quickly, not the shallow kind spread by gossip but the kind that carries weight, the handwritten note that came later to Victoria's desk, its ink shaky and honest. Thank you for the laughter. It reminded me how far I've come. Those words landed in her the way a sunrise lands on a sleeper, unavoidable, warming, illuminating mistakes. The climax of the change was not a speech or a public reveal but a small moment at the edge of the lot when a young driver, Maya's counterpart from the new company, leaned against the white truck Elias had touched first and whispered to him something that held all the nights he had endured. "You gave me my road." Elias only smiled, the slight crinkle at the corner of his eyes like a map of storms weathered, and told her in a voice that had learned to carry other people's hopes, that dreams do not shrink because eyes close on them. They wait for the right hands to build them again. That was the emotional pivot, the exacting, quiet human beat that pulled the room's soul from judgment into a joint, astonished reverence. Near the ending, if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment, and tell us where you're watching from so we can appreciate you. In the last light, the trucks drove off with second route logistics stitched across their backs, and behind each wheel sat someone who had been passed over and now was passing forward packages of food and letters and work, small reliquaries of normal life. Victoria cleaned her desk with deliberate care. The smirk that had worn like a shield melted into something softer, and for the first time in years she felt like she had witnessed something true and rare. The day a community learned to measure worth by the courage to rebuild instead of the neatness of cloth. Elias walked back to his quiet, to the workshop where hands know the language of repair, and he carried with him the kind of contentment that won't trumpet itself loudly, just a steady, deep knowing that the world had shifted a fraction toward mercy. Because kindness always wins.